Chapter 10. Deception. The world won't stop spinning away like it's trying to escape his grasp. Like he's pursuing it and the world wants nothing to do with him. He shouldn't be surprised. Most of the world doesn't want anything to do with him. But the cave walls twisting out of his reach seem a bit extreme. Even the stars outside the cave refuse to stay in place, and their dance makes him dizzy. Nothing is certain. Nothing makes sense when reality keeps warping itself into knots. The one constant, the one point of certainty in his entire existence is the pain. In some dim, deep recesses of his mind, he thinks it should fade. That over time he should get used to it and begin to heal. That he should stop feeling so much. Too much. Everything is too much. But the pain doesn't fade. So long as he lies perfectly still, it doesn't worsen either. Nothing changes. This, he has to assume, is his new life. Nothing has changed, so nothing will change. For however long he manages to survive, things will be the same. Still, aching, cold, alone. His eyes close and the darkness shuts out the spinning for an instant. This isn't any better. Though the dizziness subsides, the pain is more than willing to flood in, filling the voids left behind. He opens his eyes again, and a shadow obscures a patch of the stars. He blinks, and the shadow moves closer. It doesn't bother him. Everything is moving. Everything but him. It makes sense that the shadow would move too. Look at me. The voice is cool and hollow. A woman's voice, though he can't discern anything else. You're still here. Of course he is. Where else could he be? It's the rest of the world that won't stop moving. He has been right here almost as long as he can remember. His eyes begin to close again, and the shadow looms nearer. No, stay awake. He isn't sure why, but he wants to obey. It's difficult. He's tired. So tired. And the pain cutting through his chest and radiating outward drains what little strength he has left. If he could sleep, it might help. It might be an escape, if only for a little while. The shadow shifts to the side and he struggles to follow it with his eyes. Something about the silhouette looks familiar. He thinks he recognizes the flowing robes and the broad hat. He should know her. He thinks he does know her. If he can just reach the memories. A hand hovers over his forehead and he can feel the warmth against his skin. Is he really that cold? It's hard to tell through the fog clouding his mind. The hand lingers just an instant over his forehead before retreating, and then something cool and wet presses against his mouth. You're dehydrated. Drink. Slowly. The water is sweet and crisp, and it soothes his burning throat. Everything still hurts, but for the first time, he finds a shining point of relief and clings to it with all his might. If he can focus on that, maybe everything else will fade away for a while. Maybe it will be a little easier to keep breathing. He doesn't feel his eyes close, but they struggle their way open again to find the figure bowed over him, glowing a soft bluish white. Glowing or illuminated, he can't quite tell the difference. Through the veil draped over her face, he can make out the delicate curve of her cheeks streaked with red, and big, dark eyes that seem to pierce straight through his middle. He remembers her. He knows that he does. If he can just figure out why. It takes all his strength, but he reaches for where her hands rest against his chest. She pulls just out of his reach, and the glow flickers and fades. Her eyes bore into his. Don't. Her voice is softer this time, and the hollowness in her tone has faded. A different memory drifts toward the surface. Don't try to move. He hears a different message. Stay back. Don't ask questions. Don't try to recognize me. Do this my way or do it on your own. His strength fails and his hand falls back to his side. There's a slow exhalation and the glow returns, growing brighter and brighter until he has to close his eyes to block it out. Much as he wants to listen to her, much as he wants to push back the memories so that she might stay, his mind wanders. He remembers another moment just like this, lying on his back, immobile and in pain with a figure knelt beside him. He remembers a glow dulling all the sharp edges of his pain, and a gentle voice offering reassurances through the haze. The Painted Lady. That's who she is. Or it's one of her names, at least. For now, it's the only one he can find. For now, he can only hope that it isn't enough to drive her away. After a long time, the glow fades again, but he can't manage to open his eyes. He is tired. Far too tired. A hand brushes across his forehead, and then something soft and warm settles over his chest. Though the ground is still cold and uneven, he feels something almost like comfort. Try to rest. You need time to heal. He couldn't disobey if he wanted to. Dressing as the Painted Lady feels strange tonight. She isn't going to the village. There's no real risk that she'll be discovered or that showing her face might put her in jeopardy. She doesn't need to hide behind a disguise tonight. Not really. Still, she is meticulous in applying the streaks of red pigment. At her core, she knows that it's absurd. There isn't any real reason to disguise herself from Zuko. Even on the slight chance that he is lucid enough to recognize her, there is nothing he can possibly do about it. He can't follow her. He can't harm her. And yet the thought of being recognized sends chills up her spine. It will be better this way, she tells herself. She can't leave him to wither away alone in a cave. After everything, she owes him at least a chance. But he doesn't need to know her name. That belongs to her. Healing him will be more than enough. Maybe this will even help him. If Zuko doesn't recognize her, maybe she can buy them both a little more time. If she never shows her face, then maybe she can keep coming back. Maybe she can give him a better chance of recovery. At least that's what she tells herself as she sets off from camp, spare waterskins strapped beneath her robes and blankets draped over her arms. She is disguised for his sake, not because she is afraid. It has nothing to do with the fact that the veil makes her feel like a different person, like someone who belongs here. Like someone who should be helping him, rather than someone who has been tricked by a misplaced sense of duty and debt. He is unnaturally pale when she reaches him, and though his eyes are open, they refuse to focus. His breathing is thin and ragged, and he struggles to find her face. Her stomach sinks. How long has he been awake? How much time has he lain here, alone and in pain, and aware of it? Katara edges into the cave and kneels beside him. Through the scorched remnants of his shirt, his skin looks worse than before, bruised and blistering all across his chest. Carefully, she pulls away the shreds of fabric, cutting through crumbling threads with her bending when they prove too stubborn to tear with her bare hands. There's no use in trying to salvage his clothes now. Not when she can sense his pulse a few inches away, faint and erratic. It's lucky that it's so dark. What little she can make out by the pale starlight filtering into the cave is already enough to make her stomach turn. She's seen horrific injuries before, plenty of times, but never quite like this. Never while the heart keeps beating. It's a wonder that he's still holding on at all. She does her best to keep her eyes averted while she helps him drink, then brings the rest of the water to his chest and pours herself into healing. This part is easier. By now, she knows the shape of his injuries, where all the jagged edges lie, and instinct guides her hands as she pieces them back together. With all her focus directed inward, on the struggling organs and torn tissue, she can forget the burns for a little while. She can pretend that the only damage, the only pain, is fading away between her hands. That's a lie. She's fully aware that there is more wrong with him, but after a while, she begins to feel his energy as well. A warm, faint light pulses outward, shining through all the cracks like it's trying to help mend them. Like it wants to help Katara's healing along, if it can only figure out how. Though it flickers and fades, there is something hopeful in it. He's still fighting. Even deep, deep down, even through all the pain, he's still trying to survive. If she's careful, she can guide him back along that path. She just doesn't know how far she can take him, or how much time she has left to do it. When his heart and lungs, all his organs, seem to be functioning properly again, Katara hesitates, just holding the water in place to soothe him while she surveys the rest. Even with all of that fixed, there is still too much damage. Burns trailing up and down his arms and torso, cracks in too many bones to count, and wrapped around his spine an absurd wrongness that she still can't identify. There's still so much she needs to do, so much she needs to fix, and she hasn't the faintest idea where to start. As she puzzles over it, her gaze tracing from one injury to the next, Zuko's hand raises just a bit. Her breath catches, and she looks him in the eye for the first time. His forehead creases, and by the glow of her healing water, his face glistens with beads of sweat. Even in the dark, his face is ashen, and his eyes still refuse to focus. But his hand is still there, reaching out, trying to find her. Katara pulls back. Instinct tells her to take his hand, to reassure him that he isn't alone, that the pain will fade in time, that he'll get better, and that she'll be here whenever he needs her. It may not be entirely truthful, but that doesn't matter. Comfort and reassurance, that has to be what he's looking for right now. But his skin is raw and puckered from the burns, and Katara doesn't dare to touch him unless she's prepared to heal it. Unless Zuko is still and quiet enough to tolerate the healing. Don't. She forgets to disguise her voice, and it comes out quiet and uncertain. Don't try to move. It's just going to hurt you more. I know it's not the kind of help you want, but you have to give me time to heal you first. Maybe in a day or two, when the burns are healed and the cracks in his ribs begin to close, she can spare a little time for comforting words and holding his hand. No, she tells herself. Even then, she can't be too soft with him. She can't comfort him the way that all her instincts say she should. She's here as his healer, nothing else. She's not his friend. They cannot, will not, be friends. His hand hovers a second before it falls limp at his side again, and Katara lets out a breath. Good. She can't be certain that he understands. She can't be certain about much of anything, but at least he's stopped. She draws the water back together again and holds it against his midsection. As the healing glow brightens and spreads, her eyes are drawn downward to the burns, to the swollen, glossy patches on his hands and arms. She remembers when her own hands looked like that. When the sharp pain drove her to the edge of a river where the water first responded to her silent pleas and smoothed the damage away. But Zuko's burns are worse, and he's had them for a full day. And yet they haven't stopped him from reaching out in search of her, in search of warmth and reassurance. Her eyes prickle inexplicably, and she clenches her jaw. The burns have to go. Even if she can't take hold of his hand and tell him that he's going to be okay, he should at least be able to reach out. He should be able to try without causing himself pain. She traces the burns up to his shoulders and begins there, frowning as she tries to wash away the redness and the swelling. In the periphery, she can see his face contort as his eyes press shut. She hopes that it's exhaustion rather than pain. She hopes that he's trying to rest. Slowly, carefully, she works her way down one arm, then the other, repairing his skin inch by inch. It's too soon and too dark to know whether any scars will be left behind, but by the time she's finished, the skin is smooth and whole. This is practical, she tries to convince herself. Both the night and her strength for healing are running thin, and there is so much to do. But his burns are gone, and with them, most of the danger of infection. His ribs are still broken, and his spine encased in impossible tangles, but the burns could have killed him in a matter of days. Or, she adds as she drapes a blanket across his chest, maybe it was only pity. Maybe it just bothered her to see him in pain. And maybe some small part of her wants him to be able to reach out for help, for comfort. Maybe a part of her wants to provide it, even though she knows that she shouldn't. She sits down beside him as his breathing slows and he lapses into sleep. His breath still comes in shallow rasps, but they are steadier than she remembers. And in sleep, his expression eases too. He's better than he was before. Not very much, but better. She pushes her veil aside and watches his face, nearly lost in the shadows of the cave. More than anything else, the softness in his face reminds her of Ba Sing Se, of the catacombs, and the precious, fragile minutes when she believed that he was different, that he was good, and that he might choose a better path. A path with her and with her friends. After what he's done to help the village, she almost believes that he's capable of it, that he can change. After throwing himself into danger to keep Katara safe, she can almost believe that the thoughtful boy she met in the catacombs is still in there somewhere. Almost. Or maybe she just wants to believe that Zuko is worth all the effort. Her hands clench into fists and she closes her eyes. She can't allow herself to believe that. She fell for his act back in Ba Sing Se, and she can't fall for it again. If his kinder side was ever real, it must be reserved for his own people, for rebuilding villages in his own nation, for doing his duty as royalty. He never would have protected her if he'd known that she wasn't Fire Nation. Her insides knot up. The worst part is that she can't blame him for anything he's done here. Katara cares about the village too. The common people of the Fire Nation are just that, people, and she can't keep herself from caring. Why is it that she feels so compelled to act, to help, when Zuko has never returned the favor? He's never knowingly taken a risk for anyone outside the Fire Nation. How can that be when he apparently cares so much for his own people? Or maybe that isn't the worst part. Maybe the worst part is that despite it all, Katara wants to help him. And as time goes on, as she continues to heal him, things will inevitably become clearer. If he survives, he'll grow more lucid by the day, and Katara's stupid, childish optimism will be dashed to pieces when she discovers which side of him is real. One way or another, she'll find confirmation of what she already knows, that Zuko has never cared for anyone outside the Fire Nation. She'll have to live her life knowing that she was tricked twice by the same boy. Because if she is honest with herself, she has to admit that she doesn't just want to help him. She wants to believe that he deserves her help. She wants to believe that those moments of kindness in Ba Sing Se were genuine, that he has a heart after all, and that he is capable of change. For a while, she watches his sleeping face before she bends the sweat away from his forehead and tests his temperature with the back of her hand. He's warm, though not quite to the point of fever. She should leave him. Feverish or not, Katara has done all she can for him tonight. It does little good to hover beside him, lost in her own thoughts. Zuko will survive or he won't, and in the meantime, Katara should return to camp and rest. She can't convince herself to move.